Okay, let's test that my audio is going well. Okay, it looks like it. Okay, let's see. Okay, audio is good. Excellent. Okay, so let's. What am I doing? Given professionalism here. Well, welcome. This is going to be recorded. So this is going to be my Friday video, which is usually a pre-recorded video and then edited, but it's now live. And I'm going to try to do a little bit more of these just so that I don't have to edit things down as much, as well as I can like prepare a really like cohesive idea instead of you really seeing me do work, which is mostly what the videos are. It's me throughout a couple of weeks doing the work. Um, because with the Aging Journey podcast, I won't be doing everything myself, so I have people that will be working with me, and they will be credited for all of their work. So I will make sure to put their information in, you know, the the bio when I do utilize a lot of their work. So like either they're doing their art or they're helping me with like marketing or anything like that. So I will have all of their information as well as all of the players' information for you guys. Because this first campaign has been cast and we are working on getting up to session 0. So a little bit about what I'm doing. So I've already talked about the Aging Journey podcast, and so I'll just quickly reiterate that it's basically a podcast where we kind of go back in time to the 80s and 90s usually, and we play RP games themed around time and growing up. And we play in a variety of systems. And the first system that everyone wanted to play in, I kind of gave them a bunch of options of different systems, and like a few ideas that have been knocking around the old noggin, and they decided on Kids on Bikes. I really enjoyed Kids on Bikes. I thought it was a really fun game, and it's perfect to kind of start off the podcast that's kind of focused on memory and memory specifically of honestly kind of millennial and Gen X, so 80s and 90s. Um, to start with Kids on Bikes, which is already kind of created to do that. So let me pull up Kids on Bikes. So if you're not already familiar with Kids on Bikes, it is a tabletop RPG game that is heavy in like role play, and it's usually based on children, but you can play as teenagers or adults, and it's based on um, sort of like playing different roles, specifically like different tropes, also known as kind of stereotypes. They're not exactly stereotypes, but they're pretty close. But you are kind of so the whole purpose is supposed to play these different roles with you know your other players to kind of grapple with really interesting, sometimes terrifying, um, different forces like outside of like normal life. And so that is the game that we decided to play. And so then I created a I created a world, I created a idea, I created a couple of themes that I wanted to hit on, and then I did the same thing I do every campaign. I created a bit of a presentation. So I love my presentations. Um, and so this is a presentation that I've already given my players. I have made some edits, and there are some things in this one that they haven't yet gotten, mainly because I need to do that like probably this weekend. But just like finish my final edits and then share with them the entire like presentation. Um, so you guys, I guess, technically get it first if you watch this. And then I also want to share this video so that they can kind of understand some of the ideas behind my decisions, as well as how I am imagining we're going to be playing the game. So let's get started.
So Kids on Bikes can have some really cool, some really cool, scary, kind of creepy, kind of really fascinating ways you can introduce different NPCs or different villains or different like weird things. And since I'm already a horror RPG GM, this is going to fit very well in my idea that I had, which is to have my players play a game, and that game become the antithesis of the entire story. So let's look at what I came up with. And I'm actually gonna find my info. Okay. So I think I can just, here we go. Okay. So the game. So the game is called The Red Bridge. And it's going to be obviously played in the Kids on Bike system with a few modifications. This is going to include some custom tropes. And when I say custom tropes, I don't necessarily mean we are creating new ones. I do mean, though, that we're going to be essentially allowing players to tweak what type of personality and stats that they're wanting to have. Not always going to be based on the base tropes that are given, and we'll talk about those. And then of course there will be homebrew rules because I am incapable of not homebrewing anything. I have not made those homebrew rules yet. Usually I don't start making homebrew rules until I have characters completed, and then I can see like how custom we've had to create characters based on the regular rule set. And then when I start actually writing the campaign, usually then I'm like, okay, I really like this like mechanic and this idea here, but I want to change it. And that's how my homebrew rules actually like come about. And then before we actually start playing, those things will be discussed in session 0. So the story is essentially a children's fantasy adventure. Our characters or our players are going to be both children and teenagers in the campaign like arcs that we are going to be playing for the podcast. Whether we are going to go into adulthood or not is yet to be seen. I'm going to have to wait on that. That's in the future. That's in the future. Remember that I'm wanting to play, multiple different games, multiple different systems. So this is the first campaign that will be played, and this will be a multiple arc campaign. However, I'm going to be playing other ones. So it really depends on like where everyone is by the time we finish the 4th campaign arc for this. So it's essentially going to be a children's fantasy adventure that is inspired by several novels that I have read. One of the main ones being a novel called The Phantom Toll Booth. And if you're not familiar with that, you can look that up anywhere. It's actually a fairly new novel to me. I was looking for some inspiration. This is usually how I start when I create games. I look for inspiration on what I want to possibly use. And I've read Alice in Wonderland. I've watched Jumanji. I believe Jumanji is also a book, but I've not read that one. And I've definitely read and watched The Wizard of Oz. Almost every version of The Wizard of Oz, actually. My favorite is The Wiz. So, so the Phantom Toll Booth, though, was a new one for me. And so I actually have read that one. And that is the one I'm really taking most inspiration from. And what I mean by that is I really actually just recently read the Phantom Toll Booth, and then I am honestly kind of going through the chapters and seeing what makes sense for the type of world that I'm building, what type of game I want to build. The Phantom Toll Booth is really interesting because of the adventure this child goes on and the way that they add like alliteration. It kind of reminds me of like a twisted Sesame Street. Like if you like if you were plopped into like another world where Sesame Street was like real, like a real world, but it was like twisted. That sounds fun to me. I really, really am actually enjoying that book. I won't be taking all the themes and characters and all that. I won't be taking most of that. It's really inspiration. So like I'm reading it because I'm like, oh, this is really interesting, cool stuff. And then I will be creating new things that have to do with what I've read. Same thing with Alice in Wonderland. I have read that many times, and so I don't need to read it again, but I can pull from my memory. As well as the different versions of Alice in Wonderland, as well as the Return to Wonderland. So all iterations. Same thing with Jumanji. And even though I'm pretty sure Zathura isn't in the world of Jumanji, I think it is, or maybe it isn't. I don't know. If you know about Zathura, such a good movie. Biased, but such a good movie. And it was supposed to be like a sequel to Jumanji, but I think they've scrubbed that. I don't really know. But Jumanji and Zathura, good stuff. And then we have, of course, The Wizard of Oz, which I think is kind of, it's not actually the basis of this game, but I think The Wizard of Oz, Jumanji, Alice in Wonderland, and the Phantom Toll Booth are so similar in terms of the way they use games to allow their children to go into a world of imagination, and then that imagination becomes real. I think they are all uniquely qualified to explain how absolutely wondrous and dangerous and insane that would be for a child or even a teenager. I think you would get a different story if you were an adult. And I think they did that really good if you watch the Return to Wonderland, the second movie, the newer version. I think they showed some of the differences of like how you would think when you go into these types of worlds, even if you've been there before, but when you're adult. So remember that the Aging Journey podcast is all about, you know, what you're learning as you transition between aging cycles. So going from a child to an adolescent to a adult, or a young adult to an adult to a mid-adult to an older adult, etc., etc. So it's really looking at experiences and memories and playing them in game, and then having different themes that work around what those memories would teach you essentially throughout your life. With all that being said, for Kids on Bikes, there are powered characters, and I like the idea of powered characters. However, I am not going to start out with players being able to be powered characters just because it doesn't fit with the idea of the game that I have in mind. But I do plan to introduce them at some point later in the main campaign. I'm thinking of just adding them to kind of like the milestones, adding them to when they hit a milestone, then they can, you know, get a powered character. So the campaign schedule, this is very loose because it's because I just kind of wrote it down like yesterday. But also, it's very loose because the years are set on when I think we're going to play as characters. So the prequel campaign is when they are children. So I think the youngest, yeah, I think the youngest is going to be about 5 years old. And I think the oldest is going to be 7. And so this is in 1989 when they are playing as children. And that's the prequel. And then campaign 1 is going to be, I think, is 9 years later when they are all going into freshman year. And the eldest is going into freshman year, probably like a year late. But that's written into his character. So everything that I create is based on what my characters want. And with Kids on Bikes, it's a very collaborative. Honestly, we're all kind of in a lot of ways the GM. And so I did already go through all of the props for the game. And so we already created like the world that everybody wants to live in, like the ideas for their characters, their tropes, their personalities, and then I built the game around what they wanted. And moving forward, I will continue to build the game around what they want and also how their life changes. So we have campaign 1 where they're going to be in their freshman year, campaign 2 in their sophomore year, junior year, senior year. I'm using the years of high school as an idea of where the time could be, but at this point I actually don't know what campaign 2 and 3 and 4 would look like because I'm not going to be writing those. I'm only going to be writing the prequel and campaign 1. So things might change to where after campaign 1, I don't know, the school gets destroyed, so there's no school. I don't know if that's going to happen. I haven't, written it yet. So that could possibly happen, and instead of it being sophomore year, it would be their sophomore year, but it's not going to be, they're not going to be in school. So I put the years in here just for like reference, but really what's important is the year. We are going from 1996 to 1999. Which I think is really funny because it's right before 2000. And if anyone was, familiar with the Y2K craze, oh my gosh, it was insane. People literally thought the whole world was gonna like implode. So we're definitely gonna play on that, but that's in the future. We got a ways before we get to that. So one thing at a time. Right now, we're just working on the prequel and the first arc of the campaign. So that's the game. Let's see. Okay, so I already talked a little bit about the prequel campaign, but this is the premise. And again, my players already know all of this information, so there aren't any spoilers here until we get to the end, but I'm going to give them that information. So the general premise of the prequel is that these 5 childhood friends essentially find themselves sharing a once-in-a-lifetime adventure together. And it's all happening in just one, I think it's going to happen in one day. I think I have decided that the time in the real world and the time in this world they travel to is going to be vastly different. So one of the other things I didn't put on here in the inspiration was the Chronicles of Narnia, mainly because it's not going to be very Chronicles of Narnia like. However, the time that they did in Chronicles of Narnia I really liked. They were able to grow years of their life in this other world, but then when they returned back it had only been a couple of minutes or a couple of hours. I like that idea as well. A lot of other books do that too, though. So I think that's the what I'm gonna go with, is that they can be in this other world, which I have named Evaria. They can be in this other world for months, or to them, they can be in this other world for months. But when they return, they're actually returning on the same day. Now, I do plan to change this slightly as we get further into the campaign, because I've already written the points of issue and the main points that are the main beats that are going to progress the game. So that is going to change slightly, but we're not going to talk about that. Okay. So essentially this is all happening in like an afternoon on a beautiful summer day in 1989. And I give a short explanation of the game, but I will give a much broader or a much bigger picture of this game. There will be explanations on how like they play the game, and I will show you in a minute. There's going to be like, you know, visuals that go with the game and stuff like that I'll make. So what I really liked about the Phantom Toll Booth is that the game that's in the Phantom Toll Booth is a toll booth. Now, I did think of actually making the game in our game a toll booth. And then I remembered that, like, no. Was this popular? Was that popular, playing a toll? That's interesting. So I was like, how about we not do that? How about we instead make it another type of game? And so something that's very similar to what you have to do for a toll booth is getting on a train. But then just getting on the train and traveling on a train somewhere would be not very fun. So there needs to be goals, and then there needs to be a way where you get back home. And the fun of the game is the adventure. It's because it's a game of imagination. So the whole purpose is that they receive this gift, and the gift is this game where they get a beautiful toy steam train, and they get a couple of other things, but I'm not going to go into detail about what the game actually is. I am going to just give this very short spiel of how to essentially play the game, which is each child receives a token. This is like essentially their ticket to get onto the train, and they need that for every bridge, essentially. The goal is supposed to be to go through the bridges in order of blue, yellow, orange, green, purple, white, and then the last bridge is red. And once you cross the red bridge, you go home, because that's the last bridge. That's the goal. That's the game. The game is supposed to be, you're just traveling in this wonderful world of imagination, and you get to see the entire world by going through the bridges in order. And I kind of created a small little thing that, you know, board games would say, but it's a fun game of imagination for all ages, because it is. Since we're going to have in our prequel The Youngest Before, I literally just looked up board games and I decided what age group it would need to be to fit my players. And this is kind of what I came up with for the box. So it's literally just a bridge. It's just a bridge. It's the red bridge. It's a fun game, and you're just having fun in the land of Avaria. You get a real metal train, and you get tokens, but you only get 6. I need to change that because we were going to do 6 players, and now we're doing 5. So I need to edit that to 5 tokens. So you only get enough tokens for the amount of players I have, which is very interesting, I know. And I just put that it's for, you know, ages 4 and up, and then like a number to show like what box this was. And when I show you the map later in this presentation, I will show you what the town that they all actually live in looks like. And there is a factory in the town that is a toy factory. Now, they're not going to know where it is on the map in the prequel, because they're going to be children, and they would have probably never gone to the toy factory unless one of their parents worked there, but none of them work there right now. So unless they've ever been there because this isn't a toy factory like Willy Wonka. You don't go and like take tours. It's not interesting. It's just a factory that's pumping out a lot of pollution and toys. So I incorporated that they only get the amount of tokens required for the amount of people to play the game, and that if they wanted to get extra tokens, they would need to find those, essentially. So one of the things I tell my players every campaign, I don't ever give you information that is not important. I don't ever give you something that you cannot use. analyze all of the bits, everything I give you, because you never know when it's going to come up. So I don't make these lovely pictures and like this box cover and things because I do really actually like it, but I don't make them for no reason. So this will be something that they can actually like look at and refer to later on. And what that will actually teach them, we don't know yet. So the place that they are going to be going to is called Avaria. They'll know that. It'll be on the box. Anything that's on the box and that they get for their their instructions that come with the game is going to be free play. So they're going to know all of this information right off the bat. So Avaria is the land in the game. And it's in the game The Red Bridge. That's what the game is called. And I just wanted to make sure that players understood that Avaria is not a world. Like when you come back to the real world, it's not somewhere you're going to be able to find. It is imaginary in the sense of it really only exists when the game exists. So, and this is very similar to if you guys have read or watched Jumanji. So this is kind of really playing on that trope of like, this is the world that's only in the game, which means that it doesn't exist outside of the confines of the game. And that's going to be really important for how our players interact with adults who they might tell the story of their adventure, as well as when they get the chance to either see the game again or maybe go back into the game again. That information is going to be important to know that like the game is the world, which means if something happens to the game or something happens to the world, it's like vice versa. So that kind of makes it a little bit more dangerous. That's why Jumanji was one of my favorite movies when I was growing up, because I found it so fascinating to get to play this game that was supposed to be imagination and it turned real. But the real scary part was that it was only confined to the game. Like if you had not experienced anything that had to do with the game, like if you hadn't been playing the game, you simply didn't know any of that stuff had even happened. Which is just really fascinating and terrifying, but really fun. So I put here that Avaria is described as a place of wonder and of familiar chaos. And what I mean by familiar chaos is Avaria is going to look, it's going to be less Alice in Wonderland, which is where it's like kind of real stuff, but very, very kooky and weird, and less Wizard of Oz, which is just like a Technicolor insanity. And it's going to be more like you go and things look very, very familiar. You're going to see a road that acts like a road, it looks like a road. You can use it like a road. You're going to see vehicles that look like real vehicles. Like you're going to look like you just stepped into another place. Like you just went to somewhere in the real world. But then, so it's going to be very familiar to you. And then it's almost going to start to like merge into absolute chaos, to where you're going to be like, okay, I thought I knew where I was. I thought we were safe. But now I'm realizing that like everything we're seeing right now is a bit of a lie. So if you know anything about my other games, I love that reveal of like, there's a whole bunch of lies around me. I wonder when they're going to figure out that they're being lied to. And it's usually like what happens with when they interact with like the world, or they interact with the people. It's a slow descent into chaos is what I like to really put in my games. So that's going to be super fun. But that's what Avaria is as just a world in general. So we can really get crazy in there. And this is kind of going, the next line is that their goal is to travel through Avaria, and then they are to essentially like come home at some point. And I do kind of give them a bit of a hint that the largest power in this world is going to be their words. That is again coming from the Phantom Toll Booth. And then I just put a little something, something. The land listens, so be sure to speak plainly and clearly, and without trickery or malice. I do enjoy giving things that wouldn't have like a personality or a goal, like inanimate objects or even things that you wouldn't suspect would have like any sentience. I do enjoy giving non-sentient things in the real world sentient decisions in the imaginary world. So that'll be a pretty normal running theme for this game. Moving on. So that is all in the prequel. We have these children who really don't spend any time like in the real world. You'll see them in the real world for like 2 seconds, and then they're in Avaria for the rest of the prequel, and then they come back. That is the prequel. The prequel is that they do need to come back. So then they come back, but then again, you don't really see them in the real world. The campaign, once it actually starts, campaign 1, is going to be mostly in the real world. So I just put that, adventures in Avaria are mostly splendiferous, often wondrous, and decidedly dangerous. This is just something that kind of gives you an idea of the type of adventures they're going to have in Avaria, but also how those adventures and how those adventures end for them, and then they come back to the real world, and then they just go back to living their lives as like children to adolescents. How that is going to be played out in this game. So for the campaign 1, we actually start where the prequel ended. So we start with them coming back to the real world, and then we skip through time for, I think it's like 9 years. Yeah, I think they go up to the year 1996. Is that correct? I don't remember. These are all drafts, so I don't remember if I've made all the final changes yet. But they essentially are now teenagers when we start the campaign, and they have lived in the real world after experiencing this in our sense of time, this moment. It was literally just like a moment to like their parents, and so one of the questions that I asked my players were like, that was an insane adventure you all had, but like, what happens afterwards? Like when you tell people about this, if you tell people, and then you grow into adolescent, and now you're a teenager, like what happened to your friendships? You were all, really great friends when you went on this adventure. What happened to your friendships? What happens to you as a person? Would people believe you? Would the adults around you believe you? Would the people around you that you told about this adventure try to convince you, or do they successfully convince you that it was all in your imagination, etc., etc.? That way they get a better understanding of how their character has developed over those 9 years. So for campaign 1, we start with them being teenagers, and it's again in the middle of the summer. And why does everything take place in the summer? Well, it's a great season, but also they chose the town, which is called Shady Creek. They chose that town name, and they also chose they gave like some suggestions, and all like conferred on what type of like event they wanted to have at the time. And so they wanted to have a bit of a festival, and the type of festival they were wanting made sense for the summer. It also makes sense for like August, but I didn't want them to be starting school. So of course the summer makes sense when you're working with children and teenagers, to start an adventure and then go into school when school starts in August. So some doubt their experience as they became teenagers, and that while others are still believers, and most of them believe that their adventure is over, but of course it's not. So that is campaign 1, and since campaign 1 is going to take place mostly in the town, I created the town. So this is a make-believe town. There is no such place as Shady Creek in Missouri. But I did want to give it some context because I asked everyone like what their parents were going to be doing. So some of their parents, work in the town. It's like this is a small local focused town. In the 90s, of course, so it looks very, very different than what a local town would look like today. But this is a local town where they have like local eateries and, a home goods store that's literally just called like someone's name and a home goods instead of like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, that type of thing. So that it's very local, very small. And the largest thing they have is new, which is their massive mall. And the festival that they wanted to do was some sort of an apple festival. And I decided to do a crab apple festival, a crab apple harvest festival. If you've not had a crab apple, delicious. But they also can bloom in the summer and you can eat them in the summer. I give a little background here about like kind of the location of the creek. It's 2 hours southeast of St. Louis, but it's very small, and I literally just looked at a map and tried to find different towns that were far enough from St. Louis to where if your parent worked in St. Louis, it would be quite a commute. But some people do that. So I talk about what the locals do for the spring to prepare. So when we see our players for the first time in campaign 1, they will be coming off of spring preparations and they will be going into really getting ready for the festival, because I have decided that the festival is going to be the June 15th to the 18th. And it's a pretty big festival. It's going to have a whole bunch of stuff: live music, an orchard tour, confectionery tastings. There's going to be a Ferris wheel. And these are all suggestions by the players. And then, of course, the added antique that is, known at the town, interesting, which is the steam train. And so I have already finished the map. I will show you guys the map later. But essentially, this is a little bit about Shady Creek, a little bit about the festival, and a little bit about like why people would come to Shady Creek, like why you would live there. I know that there's a lot of towns that people live in that they're like, there's nothing to do here. But Shady Creek's actually not going to be one of those. It's going to be a town that is going to grow. And the reason I needed that to happen is because if we're going to do a campaign where we're looking at several years, there needs to be a reason for them to change. There needs to be a reason for them to open up a new shopping mall or, create more communities. Like they need to show that they're growing. And so they need to be wanting to bring people in. And that is how most small towns survive, is on tourism. As well as when people come to, tour their areas for like a festival, they might fall in love with the place and want to move there, and then they get to have residents. So that's kind of how small towns particularly used to survive. And so I kind of needed to incorporate that into the town's history of the game. So that's why I did that. Let's see what Shady Creek kind of looks like. So this is a very small kind of picture of my idea of what Shady Creek would look like. It is Midwestern, kind of suburbia, but not really. It's a pretty large town. It's pretty large in terms of like what's all packed in the town, but it's also pretty isolated. So you'd have to go like several miles out of town to get something that is as fancy, as a Walmart, that type of thing. So it's like pretty dense. They have a lot of stuff, but it's also very quiet. I'm hoping that this picture gives, moody, fairly quiet early in the morning. It should be giving you, there's a paper boy in this area, even though you can be a girl or a boy or however you identify. So there's a kid that delivers the paper. Perhaps this is a town that, still even allows milk to be delivered. Like, this is one of those towns that, even though they are trying to progress, with technology and how like the rest of the country is progressing, they are fairly traditional in a lot of their ways. And that's pretty normal for this time period. So this is the map that I'm going to be sharing with my players probably today or this weekend. And this is Shady Creek in 1986. So this is the children's map. There are going to be several maps. There's going to be, I think, 4 different maps. Not really different, but they're going to be different. And then this is just for the prequel and the campaign 1. Once we get to the newer campaigns, like 2 through 4, there's also going to be different maps for those. And when I say different, I mean it's going to be the same map because the city is going to be kind of the same. But things do change over a couple of years, Some places might close, new places might open, places get bought out by other places. Like, cities change, even towns change over time. So I needed to have different maps for all of the different changes that I understood or I am planning for based on the type of stuff I want them to do. So this is a very easy, like, not uncomplicated map. It just shows you the town. It shows you the places. There's a map key. It looks like it's out of order, but remember that this is the children's map. So this is the same map that they're going to have when they're teenagers, except for they're going to know everything in their city. When you're a child, you mainly just understand where things are based on like where your parents take you or where you're allowed to go, like on your bike and things like that. And again, this is a fairly large town. So all of our players are actually going to be living in here, which is the hills. And this is a community where they're all going to be living, and it's called the Hills, and this is the I section. So all of this is all housing. This is all residential. And so there's a couple of places that they're going to be very familiar with because their parents are going to take them to places. And then there's going to be some other places they're going to be familiar with because it's like really close to them. And then there's going to be some places that they understand that there are buildings all around them, but it doesn't necessarily mean they know like what they are. And so that's why most of this is blank. So over like across from them, this is the hospital. So this is the only hospital here. So they were either all born here. If they were all born here, they were literally born here in this hospital. And it happens to be across the street from this residential area. And there's like, what is this? This is the Little Creek Farms. So this is literally, it's almost kind of like a little tiny petting zoo where you can also buy like, fresh milk and stuff like that. So we have that. That's definitely going to be really popular to take kids, on a weekend or something like that. There is no zoo here because we're doing a little big town, So we have Little Creek Farms, which is kind of acting like a little tiny zoo. So there's no zoo or anything like that. To that sense, there is also no like large known grocery store. Like Murray's Grocery is the grocery store, and it is a grocery store that is kind of local. It's not like, oh, these are these are the local grocery stores of like the Midwest, like they're all over the Midwest. This is more of like a local grocery store. Like this is the only one. And it's just here. And so of course that is a place that most of they will know about. Over here, here's the Shady Creek Library. And then we have, of course, all the parks. They'd be pretty familiar with all the parks. And then they do have a terrarium conservatory, which is kind of acting like a half museum, half like conservatory, like a butterfly conservatory, and half it's acting like a place. It's acting like a place you can go to do stuff. And that's kind of what the little big town mentality is. Like they're not going to have some of the bigger items that you might think of, but what they'll do is they'll try to create spaces that the entire family can go to and at least experience some stuff. And so this place doesn't have like a children's museum, but this kind of acts like a children's museum. But it's a terrarium conservatory. And the reason why the a terrarium conservatory makes sense for this town is because they do have an orchard, which is X here. They have a lot of this whole area here is the festival space. Like this town is known for this crabapple like festival, and so they really put all of their money and time into making sure that they have all of the like amenities that are needed to have a festival in the town. You know, a lot of places have like the carnivals and festivals out like slightly outside of town. This one is in the center of town. So things that you would normally have in the center of town for like people who live there are not here. And then they have a huge park over here as well. They have a lot of green space in this town. It's really nice. So you can tell that this town is like more of a town where they are very used to doing everything outside, and they have a lot of activities to do outdoor things. They probably have some trails or something. I don't know. I will do like a blow up map of different areas that they will actually be traveling to. But in the children's map, they're not going to be traveling anywhere. The children are in Avaria, and this children's map is just so that they can kind of see what's in town. So when I make references to when their parents go somewhere, or when they come back, if I ask them like, where do you all want to like go to like later, when they come back to the real world, they'll have a reference, but they're really not going to be in Shady Creek in 1986 for very long. So they don't really need to know the whole map. They're not going to be able to go to any of these places, but they will be able to have a good idea of like the locations of like where they live, where the grocery store is, and where the schools are, because this is the elementary and high school. And I think over here is the high school. But you can't really see it because they have their years off of high school. They'll all be in elementary and middle. So S and R are the schools. So that is the children's map. And then of course they'll have a teen map. And then they'll also have another map, but that will be, you know, a special map that I'm not going to show until I'm ready to. Oh my gosh, that's it. Ah, and that's it. For some reason I thought I had more stuff. Yes, I didn't. Perfect timing. That took about 45 minutes or 50 minutes or something like that. So that's perfect. That's about how long I wanted to take. So that is the Red Bridge. There will be more to come. I'm still working on it, obviously. This is just kind of like the preliminary that I usually do for all of my games, just to get it ready to give a good idea of what I'm thinking and to show how I'm building the world. Next steps. So we are all working towards the session 0. We're not ready for the session 0 yet though. Everyone's working on characters. I am going to do a one-on-one with each player to really solidify their character. And then I will probably do not a group, but like a small group of, if they have people that they are going to be, other players that they're going to be close with, like their characters are going to be close to, and have like a small group meeting with them as well, to kind of go over smaller details. Now, everyone is making their character based on their teenager character. Which may change. They are aware of that. But they're going to make it now so that I can, you know, start building the world and have some idea of where everyone's going to end up in campaign 1. But when we play the prequel, things could change for their, you know, their teenage character. Because the prequel is not going to have they're technically going to use their character sheet, but not really. Like we're going to kind of operate it as if they have an idea of what their character is going to look like in the future, but they're not going to be operating on like a children's character sheet. We could do that, but we're not going to because of how I want to focus the game on their role play decisions. And so I will talk more about that when I figure it out. Because as I'm saying it, I'm like, how are you going to do that? And like, I don't know. I haven't gotten that far. Don't ask me hard questions. So I'm working on this, here and there because I do have like other responsibilities, but I'm very excited. I think this is going to be a really fun game. I think it's going to be really unique. And I think that it's going to be really interesting to play a game inside of a game. So I have to create this game. I kind of started creating it, but I need to like create the full rules on this game and and instructions, and make sure everyone has like pieces, because they're going to need like a token. They're going to need like, when you play an actual game, you have like you'll have a bridge that you can put on the map. So you'll need that. I also need to create a map of Avaria. And this won't be like a map. It'll be a flat map because it'll be the game. So that's interesting. And then I'll need to also figure out how I want to explore the different themes in the game. So I'm laughing because this all sounds really fun. I just need to kind of, probably start it. So that is the next steps for me. And the next steps for my players is just to, really continue to finalize their characters and their relationships with the other players. And then hopefully we can all get a session 0 done by the beginning of April. That will be recorded. I don't know if I will put that on YouTube or not. But that'll be recorded just so that everyone can know what we did. Just in case we all forget immediately. And then we will start scheduling recording the actual sessions once I have the first, 2 or 3 written, which is usually my role, or my the way I organize writing games. I'll write the first session pretty like detailed. The second session much less detailed. The third session only, honestly, half of it will be really written, mainly the beginning and a recap. And then after that, I just kind of go off the cuff and I'll just make notes of what I kind of want to happen based on the previous session. That's usually how I do it. So what I'm thinking is that podcast episodes is, if you don't know, this is for a podcast. So it is being hosted by Acast. And so you can, did I put it in the, I don't remember if I put it in the chat, but I will try to remember to put the link in the chat. But it'll be on the podcast website. And so what we're going to do is we're going to record everything, edit everything, and then it'll come out in like succession. So it'll be like scheduled to come out at different times. And I'll just try to make sure to let YouTube people know. I have not yet decided if I'm going to put the whole thing on YouTube or not. I've put a lot of stuff on YouTube because why not? But I haven't decided if I'm going to put the whole thing on here, or if I'm just going to put like maybe the first episode and then have everybody go to the podcast website so that you can listen to the rest of them, because it is a podcast format, which means it's audio only. So putting it on YouTube is a little tricky, because it does need to be a different format to put on YouTube, and then I have to have some sort of picture. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know if enough people would be interested in watching it on here. So anyway, that turned into a little ramble, but I think I'm done. So that's it. That's the Red Bridge. That is the Kids on Bikes campaign that we are going to be starting. I have in my mind that this is going to be starting in May. That was the original plan. And when we actually are on on schedule. I feel like we're doing good on the things that need to be done. So the only thing that would really hold us up is me not writing when I need to write. I'm going to say right now that the plan is for these to start coming out in May, either weekly or bi-weekly. I haven't made that decision yet, but I'm super excited. Really great that this is going to happen pretty soon. This has been a project I've really wanted to start working on for a while. So very, very happy about this. So thank you all for watching and learning a little bit more about the new campaign I'm going to be doing. I will continue to do weekly videos. Some of the videos might be podcast episodes. Some of the videos might be these, just because I have a lot that I'm doing, and so sometimes I don't have time to show the game planning stuff, which is why I'm starting to do more lives. That way I don't have to create a video and then edit the video. I can just do a live and show you what I've worked on. So hopefully that works well for people who are wanting to see my process still, and still wanting to see the games that are, coming out of my brain. But it kind of puts less stress on me for creating this content. So this is now going to be the end. I think I've tried to end this like 3 times. I'm ending it now. Thank you all for watching. And as always, I will see you next time. Bye.